Okay, so I'm going to skip all the initial slides, if that's okay, and just go directly to the product and perhaps just overview really quickly what we're looking at here. So when looking at a complex environment, we want to make sure that we answer the very basic questions to make sure that we achieve the ultimate quality. And those questions is, what is it that I need to test? How this works, how this scales, is the data correct, and is it ready to be released into production? And to answer those questions, Tricentis offers this gamma of products in which we're going to review one of them today, which is Tricentis Tosca. So I just want to leave it out there, especially in the recording, so that if other folks would watch this later, they know that we offer solutions in other areas as well. And today we're going to be focusing on the does it work question and on the Tosca answer. So when we look at does it work, we look at Tosca and how this accelerates the release cycles by 80%, which increases the automation rates in 90% of all of our clients and increases quality. All of that with all of the differentiators that Tosca has when comparing to legacy automation tools. Very brief overview for the interest of time in Tosca. I'm pretty sure that the team has good knowledge on Tosca. Tosca's forte is its model-based test automation that doesn't require scripting, doesn't require development skills. Even with that skill, we can this functionality, forgive me, we can also automate end-to-end testing with hundreds of technologies that are supported. And we can offer as well on-demand test data management, risk-based testing. And on top of that, we have a module of service virtualization, which is nothing. Yes, honey? Okay. We can offer an additional module of service virtualization, which is not included in the original license and what we're going to show today. Tosca offers automation in both the GUI, API, and database application layers, as well as positive ROI on its results with its automation rates continuing and sustaining at 80–90% across the releases across the years, which is a real great differentiator that allows us to save a lot with maintenance, which we're going to be seeing very, very quickly. So here's a quick example of how Tosca differentiates from a model-based perspective to the scripting tools on the market. On the right side, it's a Selenium script doing exactly what the left side does. Left side is a model base in Tosca. So here you see that the left side provides us with a more of a business information approach, doing the exact same functions and spending a lot less time creating. So you have productivity of your testing team, as well as a quick adoption by allowing more people to be able to automate, because it's so easy to learn how to automate without development skills and scripting skills. How Tosca works. So very important to understand the flow of the solution. The first step in Tosca is to create modules. Creating modules skips many of the initial steps that you would have on testing, which is mapping business flows, mapping step-by-steps, having Excel spreadsheets or Word documents, or even outdated test management systems. You can directly in the application start mapping the flow, whether it's GUI or API or database, and start creating modules. Those modules are created simply with clicking through the objects. And then once you create one or more modules, you can then sequence them out into a logical business flow, what we call test cases. Those test cases can be also varied in terms of the data that they have. So I can have one business flow and generate multiple instances of data to run that same flow, with the concept that Tosca has to eliminate redundancy. So we don't want to have multiple modules doing the same function. We don't want to have multiple test cases, so that you can optimize your testing and really have a lean operation in terms of your creation and execution. Once you create this setup, you can then mix and match for multiple applications. So you can create the exact same process for application A, which might be a web application, application B, which is an API microservices application, and application C, that might be a package application, SAP or Salesforce. And then on the execution list, you can mix and match those executions and run them not only individually, but also integrated end to end. And this is the big forte as well that Tosca has. Once you execute this very quickly, even compare and benchmarking with other tools, you have reporting available, detailed managerial reporting, as well as dashboards that are available to decision-making folks. And ultimately, you want to trace all of this back to your requirements to make sure you have coverage. And this allows you to have higher risk coverage and to increase your quality. Any questions so far from the team that's onboarded? Great. So Tosca, like I said, has the model-based test automation and the support for the 160 technologies, the support for the prioritization of tests which is risk-based test design approach and test data management. I'm going to show all of those going forward. From an execution perspective, Tosca can run locally, but also remotely, what we call distributed test execution. So you can have agents running on multiple virtual servers, remote servers, cloud machines, so you can parallelize your execution. But you can also integrate this in your CI/CD pipeline. So if you have a Jenkins pipeline or Azure DevOps or any other pipelines, Tosca's API is open, and you can just have an API call to an execution list and have it trigger on multiple executions at the same time without a touch. And like I said, on top of that, we have an additional module for virtual service virtualization that will allow you to have environments that are not complete.
Work in progress.
What is that? Is that a question?
Is that a question?
How do you're unmuted? Just
No, I don't have any.
Okay, great. Perfect. So in terms of what we call test case design or test data variations, we have the process of creating algorithms for a specific flow. So imagine you have a flow of an insurance calculator. You want to select a vehicle, provide vehicle details, and so forth and so on. So on the left side, you have the flow of the business test case. And then for this flow, you would have multiple variables, and for each variable, you would have multiple instances of data. So for instance, for the engine performance, you want to have 75 horsepower, 75 to 124, 125 to 20, so forth and so on. So you want to create variations of those data. But you want to make sure that you test this in an optimized way. Otherwise, you have millions of rows to test the exact same thing. So what Tosca does is it allows for combinatory algorithms, multiple types of different algorithms, including Tricentis own linear expansion that optimizes this creation by creating the maximum variation of data with the minimal number of data variations possible to really optimize your tests. So let's, before moving into API tests, let's move into Tosca so we can quickly see a demonstration on how the model-based test automation works. So here I have an application that we're going to test just to show how it works. You select a vehicle type, and I'm doing this in a web application. We could do this in a SAP. We can do this in multiple applications. So I select the type of vehicle. Once I select the type of vehicle, I select the vehicle type, and here I have a list of vehicles. So let's say I select BMW. You will see this in this little monitor. This is just a tool to help us see the services. You have basically a GUI app that calls for multiple services. So you're testing both the GUI and the API at the same time. You have a service call for BMW, and on that response, you will have the number of seats. You also have the fuel type. If I pick another vehicle, for instance, Volkswagen, you see that the list changes for each one of those vehicles, and you see different types of service calls in here. Here in Tosca, we have the multiple areas that I showed, the requirements, where you map the test cases with your requirements to make sure you have your coverage. And once executed, you also see the results. In the test cases area is where you create your test case. You can see this test case here. I'm going to create one from scratch. But if I showed you an end-to-end test case here, it will look like that. You have either the step-by-step with the steps, or you can see a flow like we saw on the other graph over there. On the modules, we're going to work on this module, but just to show you some examples of how modules look like. This is how a module looks like. It's a screenshot in the case of a GUI, and then the objects that screen has, so we can reuse this and quickly see where I'm going with this with my application. On test case design, I just create variations of data, and on the execution list, I create the sequence of applications that I want to test. So I'm going to start by creating a module, and I'm going to create a module. First, I'm going to reuse a module. So I have one here, and in Tosca, everything is drag and drop select. So it's very simple. So to create a test case, I just select a module that I have created. I drag into my test case, and I drop into my test step. So now I have a test case with one test step, which is select a vehicle that I want to test. So let's, for this test, select an automobile and just say click. And I can do click where I see the moving of the mouse button, or I can just say X where I don't see that movement. And the automation is basically that, super simple. So let's just run this step, which will then select the type of vehicle in our insurance application that we had showing here. So if I right click on it and say run in Scratchbook, it's basically our debug version, run just the step, not all of the steps. And you will see Tosca in effect. You see the progress bar on the bottom, and then you will see Tosca going and selecting the type of vehicle that we actually selected on our test case. And then you will see the application moving to that option. Perfect, super easy. Now, let me show you how I create a module. So let's create a module based on this screen here. So it's a sequence of flows based on the flow of your application. So I go back to Tosca. I select that folder where we had the initial module, and I can use the options on the top here. I personally prefer to do right clicks. So I right click on the folder and I'll say scan application. Notice that I can scan APIs, mobile devices, PDFs, remote terminals for mainframes, web drivers, etc., etc. So I'm just going to select application, where we can actually select the application that I want to scan. And I'm hoping you guys can follow me and everything is going good so far, and you can hear me well and see the movements here. And then once I have my X scanner, I can just say, well, whatever I'm running on my machine, Tosca is a currently on-prem solution running on a Windows machine. This is going to evolve as the time goes, and this time might be shorter than we think. And so we select the application, hit scan, and really now all we have to do from a model-based test automation perspective is simply to select the items that I want to automate. So really in this XScan, once it's ready, it has recognized the application technology. It knows it's a web application. If it was an SAP, it would know as well, and it will use the appropriate engine. Once it's done, all I have to do is just hover my mouse over all of the objects in the screen that I want to test. So I can select, for instance, just a few of them. So I'm going to select this enter vehicle data. That's a check that I do to make sure that I select all the mandatory items. And then I'm going to select a few of the mandatory items. I'm going to select them all, just for a quick example. And you see that I have all those objects listed here. And I could even change the name if I want to, just to make sure that in Europe, KW might make sense, but in the US, you might want to call it horsepower, so you can change it on the fly and basically finish screen. So if I want to go to the next screen, I can just fill this up, go to the next screen and scan it again. But in the interest of time, I'm just going to close this and go see what we have. So remember, we had this module created. And the good news is I can send this module to you or to your team, and I can scan this in any browser. You see I'm scanning on Chrome, and you can reuse this in any other browser, including mobile devices. So now I have a new module, and this module has different objects. So just like I did the first time, I select this module, drag it into my test case, and I create a different step. So now I have a test case with 2 steps. Again, I can see from a flow perspective, or I can see step by step. We created the first step, so now we're going to create the second one. So the first thing we do is we do a verification. So I want to verify that once I complete all of my mandatory fields, that the information in this box is 0. So I want to make sure that I select every single object here. And for that, I select the action type verify. So I want to verify that 0 is what I have in my enter vehicle data. And then I can also enter some data. So in this case, notice that for the make, I also captured the data that's available there. So Tosca not only captures the object, but also the data available in that service. So here I can select BMW, and on the BMW, I can enter some additional data here. So let's just say I want a 250 horsepower BMW. I also want to select from the seats here. Let's say I want to have a 2-seater, and I want to have a petrol type, or let's say electric power. We're in the green area right now, so let's select an electric power BMW. And basically, this is our test case. I'm going to input some data. I could change the type of action to input, buffers, wait on, selects, constraints. Tosca will handle all kinds of dynamic tables and drop downs, and without any code. So notice I haven't written any line of code, and I will not write any line of code. So if I run this step now, you will notice that we would input some data into the application, and then it will check if that enter vehicle data variable there is set to 0. And you will notice it will not be, because I have not selected all of the enter vehicle data. I have only entered 4. So 3 of them have not been completed. So if I go to my test case results, you will notice that I have failed my test, which is to show you that I have completed the entering of input data, but I have failed the test. I wanted to input all of them, but I only enter 4. Therefore, instead of 0, I have a 3 in there. So I have also a screenshot that I can look into my system and then input into a defect if needed. This is Tosca in a nutshell from a GUI perspective. Any questions so far?
Yeah. So I have a question, Danny. So imagine there is a situation after you click on a save button, right? Some service is called up, and some service is called up, and that service takes some 2 to 3 minutes to execute the result. So would Tosca handle such a situation?
Absolutely. So when you look at my test cases creation here, there are many ways that I can do that. I can, for instance, on the step itself. So let's say when I click on the vehicle, it takes some seconds there. Instead of inputting, I can say wait on. Basically, I say I wait on the results to come back. This is typical in a query to a database that would take some time. Or I can also create in this test case some intelligence around it. So I can create some if statements, while, do loops, so that I want to make sure that I have some logic around this. I can even force some wait times, which is not recommended, but it could be used sometimes. So there are multiple ways of adding logic to those steps to make sure that you get the data in the appropriate time. That's a good question.
Oh, okay. Great. Yeah, great. Thank you. So that wait on, so it's dependent on any input parameter, like how many seconds it wants to wait?
Correct. It's basically dependent on the response of the system. So there are multiple ways of configuring this. With the interest of time, I'm not going to go through a lot of things. For instance, I'm not going to go through the test case design where we could create this test case into parameters and create multiple data. We won't have time for that. But what I would like to do next is quickly go back into my presentation and explain what we see as a as a company, how continuous testing is important. So if we look at today's work, and year over year, we see this from the work quality report that less than 20% is automated, even with automation being out there for 25, 30 years. And most of that automation is still on the GUI side. So not a whole lot of services because it's complicated to test services. How we see this in the future and how we see this in our clients is you increase this API level and you put on top of that service virtualization to make sure that you can test the systems on an environment that where they don't exist, allowing also from some space from some manual exploratory tests. So if we go here back to our system, you notice that this GUI basically asks for a service in this monitor here. So let's do a similar test in the API level. So if I go here to my, I'm just going to create a folder here called API demo. I'm going to select that folder so that I can create my test cases here. And I'm going to open what I call the API scan. I already have it open here. So in this API scanner, you notice that's very similar to the GUI scanner, but it has additional information. So I can scan from a file, for instance. So let's say I don't have my service yet, but I do have my WSDL definition, my XML, my JSON schema. So I can create a test case directly from the file. I don't need the service. But let's select the service. And for this service, we're going to select that car service that we have to select the different vehicles. So all I have to do is enter the URI in here. I could configure advanced security authentication with proxies and firewalls and why not. I'm just going to click OK. And you notice that very quickly, I have my request XML for that service, and that I have a variable here. So if I just type anything to make sure that I have a response and I run this request, you notice that I have a response. So now I have a pair, a request, and a response, and that's all I need to create a test case. So I select this scenario here, and I can rename it if I want, and I select this, create an API test case. And as I do that, the steps that we created manually in the GUI side will be automatically created on the API side. So you're going to notice that in Tosca, it has been created not only the modules where I have the request and the response, but also the test cases. So the entire set has been created for me. Now I can do even more with that because as a user, as a tester, I don't want to worry about an XML. I want to have not a technical view, but I want to have a business view, a module-based view. So I want to select this variable, the make, and I want to create a business parameter. So I just go here and say, create a business parameter. So now, instead of looking at a technical view, I can just say, I have a module that gets the car, and all I have to do is enter the make. And I can do the same thing on the response side. I can just select from the make that I have selected, I want to have multiple seats and fuel types. So I can just enter that into my test case. And as you can see, my test case has been updated with all of that information in here. So here, I don't want to worry about technical view. I want to say, I want to make a request. And on that request, I want to type the vehicle that I want or select it from a list. Or even better, I can autofill based on the services. So I want to make a request for BMW. And on that request, I want to make sure that I have the number of seats that I have available on my service. So if I have this now, I have a test case that will run, select the type of vehicle, and will verify if I have this available seats and fuel types on my system. Now, it's basically the same test I would do in here in the GUI, but I would do it only on the services side. So I'm going to clear this so you can see a service call. And all I have to do is just run this test case. And you're going to notice that I'm testing the actual logic of the system without looking at the GUI. So it's a quicker run. You're going to see that executes very quickly. And it also provides me a quick result. So with a mix of GUI and API tests, I can make my complete automation successful. And you see here that I have successful test case. So exactly same thing we did on the GUI, we did also on the API level. Now, going back to my presentation, there might be times where you're trying to do this exact same test of request response, but some of those systems are not present. So maybe you're looking at an external system or maybe an internal system that's not yet ready. So in this case, you want to make sure that you virtualize those unexistent systems to mock them, to actually be able to test the system that you want to test. So here's an example, exactly with the system that we're looking in our case. So you have this application. So you see that little screenshot of the GUI that tests the insurance application. For that, you need two systems to be ready. One system is, I want to have the car information back. And the second system is, I want to have the person information back so I can create an insurance. But let's say for whatever reason, steps 2 and systems B and C are not available, either because they're still being built or because the service is broken or simply because I don't have it. And so you would fail on steps 2 and 4, and hence you will not be able to do this end-to-end test case on simply creating an insurance calculation and an insurance quotation. So to solve this problem, we want to virtualize those systems B and C in a way that it's irrelevant what I do on those sides, but I test my application on the left side there. And so this is what service virtualization does. It does in simple request response pairs or in more complete business scenarios. So you can actually virtualize the entire scenario that you were looking there from a system perspective. But even better, remember I told you about the test case design where you have data variations. With the same concept, you can virtualize your API test cases, your orchestrated service virtualization test cases, and your GUI based on the exact same data repository, hence saving you a lot of time and also reusing a lot of the assets that you have. So let's take a look how this works. So let's go back into the system. And here, basically, the situation that you have, and I can show you on the GUI just to be easier. So let's say this service is down. So the car service, I can take it down here, and I can say, well, I want to select a vehicle. So let's select the Volkswagen. And as I select that, the service is down, I won't be able to test this. You see the error message here. The endpoint is not available. So I can test my test case, my application, my GUI in this case, with the service being down. So this is where we have, I'm going to just turn this back on so we can record this service. So this is where we have the service virtualization. So let me just go back here to my original screen so I can have everything set up. And then you will see that I have my service virtualization window where the first thing I can do is create environments. So I can create different demo environments. And on each one of those environments, I can create different services. So here I have configured those services. Let me show you how create an environment looks like. It's super simple. You just point this to a database that you want to store. You want to have a proxy information, and why not? And you create an environment. And if you want to create or edit a service type, all you have to do is just configure the information on each one of them. And you see that's also simple. You can select multiple types of services. You can see the multiple versions of protocols that I can use. I can make this configurable as a client service. I can make it real service and forwarding. I will show you how this works. I can configure the output port of my virtual service. I can point this to my real services to make sure that I have fallback and I can forward, and I can make sure that my request and response are also configured. So super simple to configure. And what I'm going to do here as an example, as I turn this service on and connect to my environment, you notice that in here, I also have an OSV tab, and I can do exactly the same. So as I connect here to my host, we can just make sure that we can save this here. So once this host is connected, I'm going to just record. And again, I could create this test case from an API test case. So I could convert this API test case into an OSV and vice versa. But my demo to you today will be creating this from scratch. So I'm going to come here. I'm going to say, let's record this, start, try this. Beautiful. So let's select BMW. Perfect. Go back, stop. Okay. So now I have the pair recorded. Here we go. Import. Maybe it was just a click out and in. So I found 2 messages. So the system is working. So what happened, if you remember the API test case, we created the modules and the scenarios in the same way. So we can do exactly that. And just like we did on the API test case, we can just go into the modules here and create parameters. So it's lagging a little bit, but once it does, we can just say, well, I want to see a pretty print and I want to parameterize all of those things. So I'm going to create parameters, exact same thing we did before, just to set up our test case here. So, and I don't have to select the whole thing. I can just select part of the scenario. So here we go. Now we have a test case. You see that it looks like a test case, just like a Tosca test case or an API test case. They just have different icons. So the virtualized one, I can say, okay, so if I select BMW, I want to have, let's say, 1 seat or 2 seats. And then on the fuel types, I can just add the types of fuel here that I have. So the first one was, I think, petrol, if I remember, and the second one was electric. So what I like to do in these situations is just play a little bit, just to show you that this works. So why don't you give me a number, any number, that doesn't need to be between any number. We have 3 minutes, so be quick.
4.
4?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have 4 on the list. So how we do 4, 4, 4? Just for the heck of it. And then we're going to replace petrol with an US name that is gasoline, because we want to make sure that this is something that we understand and it's not European. You can see the system is a little slow, so bear with me. But now what I do is I'm going to go to OSV. I'm going to say deploy this scenario. So as I deploy the scenario, I want to show you how this virtualized scenario works. So if I go to my GUI and I'm going to open the monitor, I'm going to clear the log. So remember I told you can use the real and the virtual. So if I select Volkswagen, you will see a call for Volkswagen and you will see the natural list. But if I select BMW, look what happened. This is what I was trying to do in the first place. So we have now the list that we virtualized. So it has the actual values that we selected, and on the field type we have those 2 as well. So this is what a virtual scenario looks like. I'm not calling the real service, I'm calling the virtualized services. So this is,
are we overriding the existing scenario then, or is it a new scenario that is?
so on the configuration here, I want to say for this particular car service, I'm using what I call the forwarding service, meaning if I have a real service, use it. If I don't have, use the virtualize. So it's a configuration. So you see, if I select another car, so let's say I select Porsche, you see I have a call, a service call. So I'm using both the existing and the virtual. And if I turn this off, so let's say I turn the service off, and then I try to get a Honda, it should fail because I don't have a scenario. Remember, I'm just doing just for one vehicle, so it's not available. But if I select BMW, it will work. This is how OSV works for you. You virtualize the scenario, you can test the application without the need of the service actually working.
Okay.
Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Now, what I did not show you is an end-to-end test case. I can send you this video. Is where we run multiple technologies, but basically this is the summary of our presentation. Here are some examples of customers using all of those systems, and you can see the gain of velocity, of increase of quality coverage with the reduction of risk and the cost savings. And I just want to highlight that HP is one of those clients. And if you remember, HP was the company that used to sell automation services in the past. So I
Yeah,
always,
I think that is a very compelling story.
yeah, I like to show it all the time because of that.
Yeah.
Great, guys. I apologize for the hiccup. I'm glad we actually were able to come
No, I
back
think
from
this
it.
was very good, Danny and Jamie. I think this session was very good. Hari, I'm hoping it added some knowledge or
Yeah,
value to
definitely.
you. I think we should talk offline
Yeah.
and see how we can get this deployed.
Yes. Danny, before we close it, I have one other question. Since ours being GXP based application, right?
Mhm.
How would the review and approval process accommodated in this automation thing?
Did you say
So
review?
usually,
No, I think Hari, the question, the answer to that is this integrates with.
LM?
Does it integrate with ALM,
It does.
Danny?
If you
It
want
does,
to,
yeah.
it does. Yeah.
It does, yeah.
Oh.
So I think since it integrates there, I think we just need to include those aspects also, Hari, so that when the execution happens, the test scripts or test cases at the step level get updated, and wherever you need an evidence or a screenshot, that gets attached.
Yeah. For Tosca to integrate with ALM, it requires a third-party software from Desktop. It's called Tosca Connect. But it can integrate. We have clients that use it. And if you're not happy with ALM, we can also replace it with Qtest, that you have a more agile approach. And Tosca doesn't require any software to integrate with Qtest.
Right, yeah.
Fantastic, Danny. Thank you for running through this so quickly and efficiently and getting your system back up. It's almost like it was planned, so greatly appreciate it. Addition team, thanks so much for the time, and I'll send you out the recording as well.
Yeah, the recording we need that so that Hari can talk to his team internally, and we'll get back to you, Jamie, in a week or so.